Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first here on the breakup map for May 10th, today, Sunday, still have some flood watches going there for the rivers feeding into the Tanana River there, just east of Fairbanks, Good Pasture River, and Salsa Rivers. Have a flood watch out for tonight and into Tuesday morning. Otherwise, we've got mostly open along the Yukon with some areas of open. That's farther downstream now to still quite an area across the Delta, Yukon Delta, that's mostly ice. And of course, the Kobuk-Koyukuk rivers or the Koyukuk breaking up, but the Noatak and Kobuk are still pretty iced in. Of course, North Slope is as well. And still some high water levels down toward the mouth of the Kuskokwim River, but nothing, no warnings or advisories out for that area. Moving on to the hazardous weather graphic, that just signifies there the flood watch that's out for Good Pasture River and Salsa Rivers, and then the high stream levels, other areas there. That all due to rapid snow melt, and flooding is possible there in the area through Tuesday morning. And for satellite imagery, you can see variable high clouds coming from southeast over the Gulf of Alaska, spreading northwestward across the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, and up to the northwest. Mostly sunny skies, warm temperatures in the interior, temperatures well into the 70s in the Tanana Valley, Upper Yukon Valley into the Northway, Dawson, Eagle area, and some partly sunny skies with clouds just grazing the coastal areas of the Panhandle. We have a weakening front, really weak front, with some clouds and low moisture up toward Nunivak Island to St. Lawrence Island. They picked about 0.05 of an inch at Gamble, and winds that were gusting about 40 miles an hour earlier today, those are coming down quite a bit this afternoon. Will continue to do so this evening and overnight tonight. And moisture sliding on up into the Alaska Peninsula for at least higher level moisture over the top of the lower level moisture, bringing some showers to Unalaska for 0.05 of an inch. And a little bit of shower activity southern Kodiak Island at AKwx, and that's slipping on up into Bristol Bay as well. It could get picking about 1/10 of an inch of precipitation today, while Togiak had 0.15. Farther to the west, another weak front pushing rain into the central Aleutians, and again, light amounts, 1/10 of an inch falling at Adak, and wind's not much of a factor out there, that low center weakening there over the southwest Bering Sea. And on the southwest corner of the satellite imagery there, you can see the cloud shield associated with the next storm that will be beginning to affect the area out there later tonight. But today we had that weak system bring some light rain to the central Aleutians. The weak front over the eastern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, and then the showers along the southwest coast into Bristol Bay. And partly to mostly cloudy or partly sunny skies, south central Alaska, Prince William Sound. And temperatures, though, Kenai Peninsula rising to the 60s, lower 70s, and some cases mid-70s, just in the Matanuska Valley. And temperatures at Nenana, 77 degrees at 2 p.m., both at Nenana and Fairbanks today, with 70s up over much of the eastern interior there, and 60s and 70s extending westward toward the Seward Peninsula. High pressure, Gulf of Alaska, just light winds and quite a bit of cloudiness out there. And the Arctic coast seeing clear skies on the east side. Not a bad day there at all. Mostly clear with temperatures pushing above freezing out over areas of the Arctic coast here early Sunday afternoon. And for tonight, look for some chances of fog up there along the central eastern Arctic coast, possibly. Otherwise, the North Slope will stay mostly clear. And gradients starting to tighten up along the Brooks Range, so we'll start to see an increase in the northeast winds through the passes there. And showers
increase over the Kenai Peninsula. Shower chances up into western Prince William Sound, Turnagain Arm, and mostly it looks like staying south of along or south of Turnagain Arm. So the Susitna Valley staying dry. Shower chances possibly into the Kuskokwim Valley. Otherwise, mostly clear for the Yukon Delta, and not much change up over the interior. Thermal low lasting most of the night there over the central interior. Weak front, chance of rain approaching Nikolsky. Frontal remnants still kicking off some cloud showers, rain, fog, drizzle along the Alaska Peninsula up toward the Pribilofs. And the next system out to the west making an appearance tomorrow on the chart with possible gale force winds in the narrow band out in advance of that frontal boundary there with increasing chances of rain. Otherwise, mostly cloudy, chance of showers, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, Madanuska, Susitna Valley, especially southern areas, farther north you go, up Talkeetna, probably won't see any at all. And then you'll lose the clouds as you head up toward Denali, and mostly sunny, warm day again, 70s to maybe near 80 over the interior, possibly, but windier. Northeast winds a little gustier through the passes of the Brooks Range, and still a chance of fog for the Arctic coast, maybe even some flurries possible around Kaktovik. That's just a possibility, slight chance, nothing significant if it does happen. Mostly sunny for the Panhandle. And moving on to the outlook for Tuesday. Scattered rain or snow showers, central north slope, and mostly sunny for the Brooks Range. Those winds pretty much gone now, that gradient really slackening off, but those winds on the increase. In fact, gradient tightening enough, gale warnings are out for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with brisk wind advisories for the western and central Arctic coast on Tuesday. Otherwise, shower chances pretty widespread over the southwest interior to Bristol Bay. Just a risk for Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula. Pretty maritime type weather, clouds, drizzle, fog, maybe light rain, and that front low center sliding south of the Aleutians, so that's going to keep the winds down from what they would be if the low center tracked north of the Aleutians. But it'll still be breezy and wet with that area not quite reaching Nikolsky, extending back to the Shimiatu area. Mostly sunny southeast coast, eastern North Gulf Coast, partly mostly sunny south central Alaska. And moving on to forecast lows for Monday morning. Lower 20s for the Arctic coast north slope, near 30 in the Brooks Range, and then into the 40s, mid to upper over the central interior, mid 40s southern Alaska, and in the mid to upper 40s for the southeast coast there, Skagway, forecast low near 50, lower 40s Kodiak, Alaska Peninsula, lower 30s for the Pribilofs and St. Lawrence Island, as well as the Seward Peninsula. The exception of Nome in the upper 30s. Highs tomorrow back into the 75 to 82 degree range over the central eastern interior. Mid-70s Copper River Basin. And with the clouds looking for cooler conditions, 50s Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, maybe some lower 60s, especially Prince William Sound and the Susitna Valley in the lower 60s. Mid to upper 50s for the southwest part of the state there, near 50 for the high for the Alaska Peninsula, lower to mid 40s out in the Aleutians and the Pribilofs, upper 30s St. Lawrence Island, and 70 or 60s to lower 70s for the southeast coast, and that'll be followed by lows in the mid 40s there, followed by highs 65 to 73 with the warmest temperatures up near Skagway. Let me back up a little bit. Lows in the upper teens now to lower 20s for the Arctic coast Tuesday morning, 40s over the interior, and 30s and 40s southern Alaska, about covers it well. Otherwise, back to the highs here. A little milder now, 65 to 70s to Susitna Valley, lower 70s again in the Copper River Basin. And mid-50s for Kodiak Island, near 50 for the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, looking at our first flying weather graphic for Monday morning. IFR, areas of possibly, that really hasn't been materializing the last few days, but still in the forecast for tomorrow morning across the north slope in the Arctic coast and the Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island on down to the Pribilofs. Then a lost band out there in the central Bering Sea associated with that weakening front, and along and south of the Alaska Peninsula looks like some IFR, VFR in the interior, North Gulf Coast, Panhandle, and marginal VFR on the increase here across the Kenai Peninsula and from Montague Island across Cook Inlet to the western Alaska Range. That shifts northward and actually increases there along the western Alaska Range now from Iliamna Iliamna Lake, across the Kuskokwim Valley on out to the Yukon Delta coast, and northern Cook Inlet looks like marginal VFR for tomorrow afternoon, and into Prince William Sound, over to just west of Yakutat, VFR in the interior, IFR holding over the eastern central Arctic coast, and VFR holding over the Panhandle. And next system spreading IFR into the far western Aleutians. Adak and Atka, though, could see VFR at times with maybe some sun. And for Tuesday morning, that IFR zone spreads eastward to Atka by morning, and IFR again from southwest Kodiak Island, south side of the Alaska Peninsula, marginal VFR north side into Bristol Bay. Pretty good area in over the southwest interior, and that extends up along, in some cases, east of the Alaska Range or south of the Alaska Range, maybe the Talkeetnas into the looks like Fairbanks area to the White Mountains. North of there, though, a zone of VFR continues. IFR North Slope Arctic Coast and VFR for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Gulf of Alaska. That continues into Tuesday afternoon as well. And now we have VFR over southern Alaska, marginal along the south coast of Kodiak. IFR over the central western Aleutians, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, to the Bering Strait right along the coast of the western Seward Peninsula, and it looks like the Koyukuk, Kobuk, Selawik valleys, Kotzebue, right on up to Kivalina look marginal VFR for the North Slope. And Anaktuvik and Adigan both looking pretty good tomorrow, VFR flying. Both of those passes, a little bit of a lower conditions for Lake Clark and Merrill, occasionally marginal VFR, I guess, which means occasionally VFR at times as well. Rainy, trending toward marginal VFR in the afternoon, and windy staying VFR, as well as Isabel and Mentasta and Tanita, all VFR for the day Monday. Portage trending toward marginal VFR. Could be VFR, and that could happen in the mid-morning hours and last through the afternoon. Chilkoot and White, VFR. And for the freezing levels, upper level high pressure bringing high freezing levels, 10,000 feet, eastern interior into northwest Canada there, and 2,000 feet southeast of Kodiak Island, and generally 8 to 10,000 feet right down the ridge axis across the Panhandle. Cooler air out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, 2,000 feet. That's out west. Icing, areas of light to very isolated moderate rime or mixed icing, southwest Alaska, coming up across southern Alaska there, North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, maybe Matanuska, Susitna Valley. A heavier area of icing with that next storm pushing into the western Aleutians with possible considerable moderate coming into Shimei and Attu. All this from the freezing level to about 10,000 feet. And for the jet stream, upper level ridging, excuse me, from western Canada right up into the interior there, and southeast wind 60-80 knots coming across the southwest interior. A couple of troughs south of Kodiak and near the eastern Aleutians, and then the bigger storm out over the just east of Kamchatka Peninsula there, that 140 knot jet max. Otherwise, main jet well to the south. And for the 9,000 foot winds, high pressure there northwest of the Arctic, or north of the western Arctic coast. Got 35 knot winds with that. East southeasterlies 35 45 coming into southern Alaska. They're pulling that moisture, chance of showers in with it. 3,000 feet, pretty slack here, except off the western Arctic coast. 35 knots out of the east northeast. Turbulence with an increased gradient at the surface. It looks like some mechanical turbulence of the light to isolated moderate variety below 4,000 feet through the passes of the Brooks Range, and moderate chop on the increase for the far western Aleutians out there with that incoming storm and the increasing winds.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source, It warms the earth and grows our food. While the sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. And this is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from the space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the sea ice analysis done this afternoon, Sunday afternoon. Pretty much ice-free now for Bristol Bay. A little bit of ice there just western Kuskokwim Bay. And up along or on the north side of Nunivak Island. Of course, that increases as you head up towards St. Lawrence Island. Still quite a bit of heavier ice there to the east and on the north side. They're extending southward, but not quite to St. Matthew Island into Norton Sound. And from there, we'll go to coastal water forecasts for the coast along Prince of Wales Island. East winds 15 knots, central coast, north 10 to 15, seas 4 to 5 feet, northwest 10 on the north coast with 4-foot seas. Inside waters, northerlies at 15 knots with seas running 3 feet in the central and northern areas to 2 feet or less for Clarence Strait. And then for Clarence Strait on Tuesday, west at 10, seas 2 feet, central and northern inside waters, light north winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. And for the south coast, 10 to 15 knot northerlies with 6-foot seas, and farther to the north on the north coast, northwest 15 to 20, 5 to 6-foot seas. Prince William Sound, light to variable northwest winds at about 10 tomorrow with seas only 2 feet. West 15 for the Middleton Island area, western North Gulf Coast, northwest at 10. Westerly winds at 10 knots for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay. And Cook Inlet, south to southwest, 10 to 15 knots, seas running at about 3 feet. And then for the Tuesday outlook, Cook Inlet, southwest, 10 knots, pretty light with 3-foot seas. Light winds continue Kamishak Bay out of the west. Barren Islands, North Gulf Coast, westerly winds 15 knots, 4 to 5-foot seas, and west at 10 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, east-southeast, 10 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas. Bristol Bay, east at 10. Alaska Peninsula, east-southeast winds at 15 with 6 to 7-foot seas. Moving on to Tuesday, not much change for Kodiak Island. Winds stay light. Easterlies for Shelikof Strait and the east side of Kodiak there and Fognak Island, southeast at 10 with 3 to 4-foot seas. Sitkinak to Cape Sarachef, looking at a pretty uniform wind and wave pattern there. 15-knot winds in that entire stretch with 4 to 5-foot seas. Bering Sea side of the peninsula, east at 15, 4-foot seas. East 10 for Bristol Bay with seas 2 feet. Small craft advisories coming into the western Aleutians tomorrow afternoon, southeast 30, and for Amchitka, south 28, Akanatka, westerlies 15 knots. Unmac Island, west 15 to 20, and Unalaska Island, west at 10 with 6 to 7 foot seas. Then for Unalaska Island on Tuesday, southeast 15 to 20, Unmac Island, small craft advisory, southeast 25 knots with 9 to 12 foot seas. Adak east at 30, 10 to 15 foot seas. Northwest 25 from Kiska to Shimia, seas 12 feet. Southwest coast, east 15 knots tomorrow, seas 2 to 5 feet, highest south of Nunivak Island. West winds 20 knots in the afternoon for Norton Sound with 3 foot seas, otherwise light variable to east breezes for St. Lawrence Island. And light winds for the Pribilofs will become northeast at 15 on Tuesday. And the southwest coast, east winds 10 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas, northeast at 10 for the St. Matthew Island waters area, St. Lawrence Island west at 20. We've got 15 to 20 knot east-northeast winds for the Arctic coast, central and east side. West side, brisk wind advisories all the way down to Cape Thompson for east winds at 30 knots. And then there's the gales out of the east, 35 knots for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast on Tuesday. Brisk wind advisories at 30 knots, central coast all the way down to Cape Thompson. And from Wales to Cape Thompson, more northerly and lighter at about 20 knots. For tonight, chance of fog along portions of the central eastern Arctic coast, otherwise dry and mostly clear there. Look for the channeled winds to the Brooks Range to be on the increase. Showers increase. See Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, maybe into the Kuskokwim Valley a little bit, but nothing much. And stays unsettled and damp over the Alaska Peninsula, Pribilofs, central Aleutians, and fair over the Panhandle. For tomorrow, mostly sunny southeast coast again with nice afternoon temperatures and light winds, breezier through the Brooks Range. Not much change for the Arctic coast and North Slope, and still a chance of showers across south central Alaska into Prince William Sound. More widespread shower threats from Kodiak Island, especially the southwest interior up to Norton Sound and Lotto Hills. Next storm pushing rain into the western Aleutians, which slides eastward on Tuesday with the low center staying south of the chain. Shower chances over the western and central interior, back to the sunshine, south central Alaska and the Panhandle. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.